Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So Tarek and our continuing series on the MiSter FPGA DE10 Nano project, and it's time to test some more Sega Saturn games on the work in progress core from Srg320. Some of these are going to be revisits to show you progress in games that have been made since the previous core, and some of them are going to be user requests because you asked me to test certain games, and that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm also going to be showing some side-by-side comparisons in this video between cores to show you guys what is different. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, got a Patreon link down below as well. But the number one viewer request from the last batch of videos was to take a look at Panzer Dragoon Saga again. Because last time I showed this game to you guys, it was loading and getting into the first area in-game, but when you try to actually take the elevator up to the surface world, it would 100% crash. The other thing was, last time we took a look at this game is you really couldn't watch the intro cutscene. You had to beat start like it owed you money, or else it would freeze and never actually get in-game. Happy to say both of those conditions are no longer true, and we can take the elevator in the game and go up into the overworld. And again, if there's any games that I have not tested yet that you want to see, leave me a comment down below, and I'll try to make sure they get into a future testing video. But in the previous core, when we rode the elevator, it would never load into this cutscene. It would go to a black screen and nothing else would happen. And that's because in previous cores, it seems like FMV was a very big issue for the core, and it would freeze it like 9 times out of 10. And the great thing is, now you will see as we transition in, we are in the overworld for Panzer Dragoon Saga, and I 100% understand why this is one of the most requested tests that I get in comments. Not only is this game absolutely incredible, but if you want to play it in English on real hardware, you either have to have a modded Saturn, or you have to have a gigantic budget, because this game sells for multiple thousands of dollars now. I did own this back in the day. I didn't keep it. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. Well, not true. I'm sure I've done a lot of other dumb things, but I do wish I had a copy of it. But what is running on Saturn is running spectacularly. The controls seem to work perfectly fine. All of the visuals are drawing correctly. Everything that makes Panzer Dragoon Saga does seem to be in the current core. The only thing is, on the audio front, there are a lot of clicks and pops in there, so I'm not going to give you any soundtrack sample, because it's not the most fun experience if you are wearing headphones. But even the transitions between real-time 3D rendering to the FMVs load exactly as you would expect them to on original hardware. And because the core used to have problems with FMV videos, this game gave it a lot of hell, because it transitions between FMV to in-game content very quickly and very often, and that seemed to be an issue with the previous cores, where FMVs just were very, very touchy. So it's so much fun to see Panzer Dragoon Saga running on the MiSter core currently. Every once in a while you might see a slight visual blip, but it's hard to say where the core stops and where the Saturn starts, because this game pushed the hardware to its absolute theoretical maximum as far as performance was concerned. This is a very late game on the Saturn, and that's why it's so rare and so expensive, and does so much with the hardware they didn't used to see in previous 3D games. So Panzer Dragoon Saga, 100% playable, at least to the point in which you saw it here. Now moving over to a game that I wanted to revisit, because people have been talking about whether or not the Sega Saturn core saves currently. It does not. If you want to play a game and you want to see the credits, you need to pick a smaller game. Now I can 100% confirm Bubble Symphony, you can see the end of this game, it 100% just works. The audio can be a little bit crackly, but otherwise this plays exactly like Bubble Symphony should on the original Sega Saturn, and I would know. My Sega Saturn is always hooked up to my 20-inch PVM next to me, and the last game I played was Bubble Symphony on it. This is a game you can play and finish in one sitting, and it doesn't need to worry about saving whatsoever. It works one player, it works two player, however you want to do it, it's just going to be able to work on MiSter. And a lot of people are asking what type of games you can see the credits on. I've done the credits on Bubble Symphony, I've done it on the Mega Man 2D games. Those are really good games to start with, and of course Bubble Symphony is one of my favorite games of all time on the Saturn, so it is also a game I can 100% easily recommend to you to check out. But like I said, if there's a game that you want to see the credits on, don't go for the long games. Do not try to see the end credits on Panzer Dragoon Saga unless you want to leave your MiSter on for 30, 40, 50 hours. It's just not going to work. Now another game that was requested by a ton of people is Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner Soul Hacker. That's a mouthful of a title, but everyone wanted to see whether or not this worked on the current Sega Saturn core, and I'm here to tell you it 100% does, and it's got some near to perfect audio as well. So go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds or so. I'll come back and show you more games that work on the current Sega Saturn core. This is a viewer request, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Now the audio is like 95% perfect there, but you can hear some of the static in the background, especially if you're wearing headphones, and that's why I gave you the example of that, because a lot of times in these videos when I talk about the quality of the audio on the current Saturn core, I'll either say there's no audio whatsoever, it is perfect, or it's perfect with a little bit of static and pop in it. This game is one of those instances where you do get that pop. But outside of that, this is definitely a quote-unquote mixed media game. You have these full 3D environments, then you go to these static 2D images where they have different text and voiceovers going on with them. I'm happy to say that as far as the mechanics of this game are concerned, they 100% work, even though Andy D there was just feeling like walking into a wall. Big thanks to Andy D again, he does help me with some of these captures, and it is a big asset to me. But you will see this is the 2D element of it. All of the loading from different types of gameplays work perfectly fine. All of the cutscenes play, and this game is absolutely a blast if you can read Japanese. If you can't, well, you don't know what they're saying, doesn't really matter now, does it? Now moving back over to Panzer Dragoon 2, I wanted to talk about the differences in cores because people have been asking to know what changes between one and the other and what are the visual differences, because I know these videos are in succession and it's one of those things you might not remember. Taking a look at one version of the core, you're going to see here as we fly off into this canyon and go into the air, a certain graphical look is going to happen or not happen. Right now, the entire ground just faded away into pure white and there's absolutely nothing there. If we move over to a different core, you're going to see something completely different happen. You're going to fly out of this canyon into the sky, and the entire ground texture is going to remain intact exactly as it should be. This is what I'm looking for when I'm looking for visual differences between cores. And I'm not going to tell you which core is the newer one and which one's the older one, because that's not the point of this example. The point of the example is that between revisions you're going to see completely different results, because this still is work in progress, and that's why I always say this is for testing, it's for fun, don't expect to play any one game perfectly. If we move back over to the other core, you're going to see again all of the texture work on the canyon, on the ground is just going to disappear absolutely completely. It's really interesting between cores what works and what doesn't, and this is all down to VDP1 and VDP2, because you will see we're looking at absolutely nothing here until we land back onto the ground to start the boss fight. Then all of those visuals come in. If I put both cores side by side, again you can guess which one's which in the comments below. I would be curious to see if you can tell. The boss fight works exactly the same on both revisions of the core, so it's really interesting to see how things change between tests. You guys asked to see some examples of what the differences are, and with Panzer Dragoon here, it's a really good instance to show you both what can differ greatly between cores and what remains the same. Because this boss fight, even though it's not synced up, it is gameplay, it's almost impossible, looks and plays and sounds exactly the same between both tests, and that's why it's so much fun to watch the changes happen in real time. You're never quite sure what you're going to find, but it shows you how the Saturn works. When there's no graphics, that means VDP1 or VDP2 are drawing absolutely nothing to the screen. Now a game that I was very curious to see if it ran or not, because last time I tried it, it did not, is Enemy Zero. And if you've never played D or D2, this is the middle game by Warp and Kenji Eno, and it is an absolutely wild experience that is one of the most unique games on the Sega Saturn, because it's a mix of first-person FMV point-and-click adventure game and first-person shooter game where the enemies are invisible and you can only hit them by your ears. You have to listen to the enemies, it is extremely difficult, but the game has such a strange and unique story. I absolutely love it, and I'm sure the last time I tried to play this game and it didn't work, we're down to those FMV sequences because like I said earlier, the core did have issues with that. Happy to say Enemy Zero 100% plays, which is also a great thing because this is the type of game that once you can get into disc changing and that works a little bit better, you could probably 100% complete without saves because it isn't the longest game if you know what you were doing. It's also just one of the most unique games on the Sega Saturn. I love all of the D games and all of Warp's and Kenji Eno's work, so it's great to see it working on the Saturn. But it's also a really fun test because it does mix that different gameplay style up between the point-and-click adventure game and the first-person shooter game. And when you are in the first-person shooter levels, you have free range of motion and everything is being drawn in full 3D. This is running exactly as I would expect it to, because Enemy Zero was always a very fluid game on the Sega Saturn, especially from a company not known for making first-person shooters, because they never made one before and never made one after this. But this just works. All of the shading and shadowing is how I remember on original hardware. The only thing about this game that you're not going to get is any audio whatsoever. This game plays mute, there's no pops, there's no whistles, it is absolutely silent the entire time you're playing it. So right now, at least, you couldn't actually hit those invisible enemies because the little bing they make like a radar to tell you they're in front of you does not work. So this is a pure theoretical test. Don't try to play Enemy Zero on the current core, or else you're going to die repeatedly because the game has no audio. But FMV, great. 3D sequences, great. And Enemy Zero, a very unique experience I can't recommend enough. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you've played it though. Now moving back over to Bulk Slash, last time I tried to play this game, the audio would pop and click and clip the speakers something terribly to the point where I could not listen to it when I played. Now all of the audio, there's a slight crackle here and there, but it's near to perfect, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds. I'll come back and show you some more Saturn games.
To the right. Ah! Straight ahead. To the rear. Straight ahead.
Now you can 100% hear a little bit of static, but all of that translated voice dialogue, and don't forget this is a fan translation and it is spectacular, comes through clean. Like I said right before you listen to that, last time I tried to play this game, the clips in the audio were so high that I couldn't listen to it without the headphones about 5 feet away. This is definitely an improvement. Now one game that people kept asking to check out again, I was very surprised, is Darkseid. It is really interesting to have a horror point-and-click adventure game on the Sega Saturn, and people wanted to see if it was better. I'm not sure why, it's an awesome game and I'm surprised that you guys wanted to see it, but that does make me happy. Now it doesn't seem to be like there's much change whatsoever. The audio is still a little bit off, but I would say overall this does seem to be a little bit visually improved, because last time I tried to test this game, it did have some freezing issues in the FMVs, and those seem to all be resolved. And a lot of this testing video is talking more about the FMVs than even I expected, because it is a thing that the Saturn used to struggle with in the MiSter core that seems to at least be 100% resolved on the current core. That does not mean on the next one it's not going to have some sort of problem. There can be regressions, but right now that seems to be eliminated. There is still some jankiness with things jumping around a little bit, but otherwise this is Darkseid, and you definitely don't want to play the Saturn version because it's in Japanese, but it is a fun game to look at. And this is pure 90s, and that's why I left it for the last game in the series. I like to show weird or strange Saturn games in the end of these videos. Things that definitely aren't the norm when people think, hey, I wonder if that works. Something like Darkseid doesn't pop to everybody's mind, but it popped to enough people's minds to actually request it. You will see there just the slightest bit of FMV before we get into the level. That was in real time, and it is 100% perfectly functional. And it is just fun to see this era of PC adventure game represented on the Saturn, because obviously this didn't start on the Saturn. This was a computer game that got brought over to consoles, and that did happen back in the day. And if you'd never played Darkseid before and you like horror games, 100% play this. Just make sure you play it in English unless you read Japanese. I don't think any of my viewers actually do read Japanese, but leave me a comment down below and tell me if you do. Also tell me if you've actually ever played Darkseid, because I don't really find many people have ever checked this one out, but trust me, it's quite the unique adventure, and it just screams 90s from start to finish. And if you like H.R. Geiger, you're gonna love this game. Take it from me, it's weird, it's strange, and it's amazing. But that's the current batch of Sega Saturn testing for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more games, like I said earlier. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you want me to test. I can't get to absolutely every one of them, even with Andy D's help, but I do like to hear and see what you guys are interested in. But it's so much fun to see what games are working that never used to work, and it's so much fun to see the improvements in games that used to freeze or have issues. Sure that I'll be back next Thursday with another episode in our MiSter series. I'll have videos throughout the week as well, but hopefully next time I see you, we'll have a new Saturn core. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.